In the young Sheldon episode titled Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage, the narrative explores a significant chapter in the lives of Georgie and Mandy as they prepare for their wedding. The episode blends comedy, heartfelt moments, and familial tensions, while also diving into the personal complexities of its central characters. One notable moment that stands out in the episode is Connie's absence from George Sr.'s grave. This moment, though brief, holds much emotional weight, and some viewers may find themselves disappointed by Connie's choice to not visit the grave. While the absence of this visit may not be explicitly addressed within the episode, it presents an interesting opportunity for reflection on Connie's character arc, her relationship with her late husband, and the dynamics of the family. Connie, as the maternal figure in the Cooper family, has always played a central role in shaping the family's interactions. She's a character whose strength and toughness often mask a deep well of emotions, particularly regarding the loss of her husband, George Sr. Throughout young Sheldon, Connie's interactions with her family often reveal a woman who is quietly mourning, grappling with the past, and yet fiercely protective of those she loves. So, it's natural for viewers to expect that a moment as significant as Georgie and Mandy's wedding would elicit a personal reflection from Connie. A visit to George Sr.'s grave could have served as a way for her to honor the memory of her late husband while also acknowledging the passing of time. However, there are several reasons why Connie's decision not to visit George Sr.'s grave might not only be understandable, but also reflect her personal journey. For one, Connie has already experienced profound grief from losing George Sr. Their relationship, despite its ups and downs, was one rooted in history, love, and shared experience. The death of a spouse, particularly one who was part of her life for many years, is a complex form of mourning. Some individuals may find it necessary to revisit the past by visiting graves or memorials to maintain a sense of connection. Others, however, might feel that their relationship with the deceased transcends physical locations. Connie's decision not to visit the grave could be a reflection of her personal process of healing and the way she has come to terms with George Sr.'s death. Moreover, Connie's choice not to visit the grave could symbolize her growing sense of independence. By this point in young Sheldon, Connie has already been depicted as a woman who, despite her moments of vulnerability, has learned to adapt to the changing dynamics of her family. She has learned to navigate life without George Sr. and has found ways to support her family without being constantly tethered to the past. Her absence from the grave could signify that she is no longer solely defined by her role as George Sr.'s wife. She has become her own person, one who doesn't need to visit a physical grave to remember her husband, but rather carries his memory with her in other ways. Another aspect to consider is Connie's relationship with Georgie. In many ways, Connie and Georgie share a deep bond, one that is rooted in both love and mutual understanding. Connie, as the matriarch of the family, has always been protective of Georgie, and in this episode, the focus is on Georgie's own milestone moment, his marriage. The episode revolves around Georgie's growth and the changes happening in his life, and it is possible that Connie's attention is entirely focused on supporting her grandson and his future with Mandy. This could be interpreted as Connie's way of honoring George Sr.'s memory by ensuring that his legacy continues through the next generation. By prioritizing Georgie's wedding over a visit to the grave, Connie may be signaling that the future is just as important as the past, and her role as a grandmother and matriarch is now more significant than mourning the loss of her spouse. Furthermore, there's a degree of emotional complexity in how the show depicts grief. Young Sheldon often strikes a balance between humor and sentimentality, never shying away from difficult emotions, but always finding a way to incorporate humor or lighter moments alongside them. Connie's absence from George Sr.'s grave might not have been intended as a deliberate act of emotional avoidance, but rather as a reflection of her personal way of grieving, a grieving process that doesn't necessarily follow a set pattern of behavior. It might also point to the show's larger theme of personal growth and change. Over time, the characters in young Sheldon have moved past certain obstacles and evolved into more fully realized versions of themselves. Connie, too, has grown, and her absence at the grave is just another sign of her emotional evolution. For fans of the show who may have expected Connie to visit the grave, the disappointment likely stems from a desire for closure. George Sr.'s death has loomed large over the Cooper family since its initial mention, and viewers have had limited glimpses into how each character copes with his passing. Connie, in particular, has often been portrayed as the character who holds everything together, but her personal grief and need for healing may be less apparent to viewers than it is to her family. The decision not to visit the grave may feel like an unspoken moment that leaves some emotional questions unresolved, particularly for fans who still mourn George Sr.'s absence alongside the characters. However, this moment can also be seen as a reflection of the show's deeper emotional honesty. Not all losses require ritualistic acts of remembrance, and sometimes the most authentic ways to cope with grief are those that are not immediately visible or recognized by others. Connie's absence from the grave is, in some ways, a reminder that grief is personal, and not every family member will express their emotions in the same way. For Connie, honoring George Sr.'s memory might not mean visiting his grave. It might simply mean carrying on the values and lessons he imparted, allowing his memory to live on through the actions of his children and grandchildren. In conclusion, Connie's decision not to visit George Sr.'s grave in young Sheldon is not necessarily something to be disappointed by. Instead, it can be understood as part of her ongoing emotional journey and her way of coping with the past. Connie's grief is layered and complex, and her relationship with George Sr. cannot be reduced to a single act of remembrance. Through this decision, the show highlights that healing and memory can take many different forms, and that each character must find their own path to honoring the past while embracing the future.